Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. If you're returning, thanks for coming back. If it's your first time for stopping by, welcome. Hope you enjoy it. Today's video is the one from when my camera messed up, and it's the part 4 build on FE number 1. I cut out the good footage that I could save. I'm just going to do a voice over top of it because the sound's all messed up except for a little bit when I was talking about the piston rings. And there's some tips and pointers that I can put in there, and you can kind of see along as we go and see where we stopped at on the build before moving on to step 5. So let me go ahead and get this video clipped up and let me know what you think. Sorry for any inconvenience, and we'll have a backup camera for in the future. Here we go. Okay, so we're working on FE build number 1 again, and it's time to put some rings in this thing. In there. That's right, made USA. By the fine folks at Hastings Pistons Rings people. I need a longer arm or a bigger camera, but there you go. I tend to mount my ring filer in a vise sideways like this because I just find it easier to keep pressure on the rings and hold them square, and that's the main thing. You want to hold them square. You can also use a file in a vise and pull the ring towards you, but either way you do it, once you get your clearance on your ring, you want to take your file and knock the sharp edges off. That was one of the pieces I didn't get to film, but we'll show that on the next build. And then you just go ahead and start putting your rings on your pistons. Pretty straightforward. Nothing fancy here. Just follow the ring manufacturer's instructions for spacing out your end gaps so that they're not all in a straight line. You kind of spread them around. You want them about 120 degrees apart is what it works out to. Sometimes it's a little different. So, like I say, follow what it says in the instructions. Be real careful. I tend to start with the oil ring and the scrapers. Put in the second ring. Make note of if there's a dot or a diamond or anything telling you which way the ring goes in it onto the piston, because there is an upside to these rings. If you put them in backwards, they won't seal. They'll act more like an oil pump than a seal, and just you either won't have compression or you'll pump oil out. It depends. Different things can happen if you put them in upside down. So go ahead and get all the rings in. Make sure everything's clean. And then you're ready to put your compressor on and go ahead and get them in the engine. Now, I like to coat everything with a nice coat of assembly lube. In this case, we were using lubricate. It just helps everything slide better as it goes through the compressor. And yeah, I do use an old school twist type compressor because it's that way I only have to carry one ring compressor or keep one compressor in my toolbox. It'll go up to a 6-inch something bore. I've never done one that big. I mean, like big block Chevys, big block Fords is about as big a bore as it's ever been on. And I've had real good luck with the tool, and you can tell by the wearing on the bluing and the straps. I've had it for some time. It's a Lyle. Nobody's sponsoring this video, but it is a Lyle ring compressor. I do have some of the conical knock-through ones for the small blocks, but I still prefer my old bandy strap type here. And then you just get it all locked down nice and tight. And from here, we're ready to put a little lube on the rod bearing and go over to the engine, square up the compressor, and put it on in. And then here's the assembly lube going on the bearing. Give it a good wipe with your finger. I really ought to have rubber gloves on doing this, but I didn't. And we're ready to go put it in the engine. Now what I'm doing here is putting the rubber hose on the end of the rod bolt so I don't scratch the crank as the piston slides into place. Gives you something to hold on to as you drive it in. So once you get it straight and you're lined up on the crank, then just give it a good couple of whacks with the handle and a hammer to get the compressor down against the block. Get a compressor a couple of taps to square it up, and then go on and knock the piston on in. And sometimes it'll go in one hit. The handle of the hammer catches the ring compressor, slide it out of the way, and that's a dead blow 4-pound hammer. I met my main engine assembling bumping hammer. It's all rubber. It won't mar anything. And then here I am bumping the piston on down to the crank. And as you can see, my other hand's over there. If you catch a couple of glimpses in the background, I'm using that hose to drive that rod or direct that rod onto the crank. Because what you don't want to do is bump the crank and scratch it. And there I've pulled the hose off the top rod bolt and laying it across the top of the block. And from this point, I'd go ahead and get the bearing in the rod cap. And I do these one at a time. I put the piston in, seat it, lube up the rod cap, put the cap on, torque it, move on to the next one. That way you don't forget to torque a cap. So first up, once you get the block rolled over, is to put the oil pump drive in. And you want to put that drive in with that little retainer ring to the top. And what that does is that sandwiches the oil pump drive in between the oil pump and the distributor, or the oil pump and the block at the distributor opening. So when you pull the distributor out later for whatever reason, you don't pull the oil pump drive out of the oil pump and drop it into the pan, which usually results in pulling the engine and having to fish the thing out, or just pull a motor, pull a pan, and put it back in and put it back together. A lot of work for something that could have been simply avoided at building time. And now we're ready to put the oil pump in. Don't forget the gasket. Now on these FE motors, you want to make sure that your oil pump holes line up, and there's some little tips and tricks you can do there, and I didn't get to show them here because of the camera issues, but we'll show those on the next one. And it's a high volume Mellon oil pump select, heavy duty Mellon select oil pump. Again, this is not a sponsored video. And you want to make sure you pick up the oil pump drive, and then very carefully make sure your gasket stays lined up. Now that gasket's about as thick as paper. You want to put some Loctite on your oil pump bolts. I use red in this case. And go ahead and put it all together, torque them up to the specified torques, and you're ready to put your pickup strainer on, which in this case we got to take one of the studs back out and get us a bolt with a oil pickup mount on it, because this is going in a rear sump oil pan setup, kind of like a Fox body, and I don't have anywhere to mount the oil pickup right now, so this was kind of as far as we got this time around. I went ahead and tightened up the oil pump, got it in place. It's ready to go. All the rod bolts are torqued. I double checked the mains. Everything's sealed up in the bottom as far as the rear main seal goes. And we're ready to move on to putting the heads on and move forward from there. After that, we'll get the oil pan and the sump on. Timing cover, not necessarily in that order. And we're getting pretty close to ready to mount the manifold on this thing. Now I'm going to do one video just on mounting the manifold, because there's some clearances and things you have to check on these FEs when you're putting the intake on, but we'll get into all that in that video. So again, sorry for the difficulties. Wish there was a little more in-depth visual here for all the assembly, but the bottom end was pretty easy. It's just rod bolts and torque wrenches. And you've got to see how I put rings in and lube them up. And there I am putting the oil pump on and moving forward from there. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please comment, subscribe, or share. As always, practice your skills. Learn a new one. Turn them into craftsmanship. You never know how far they'll take you. So until next time, this has been Fab Race Mod Repeat. Hope everybody has a great day.